Okay, so we have a new episode of Legends and Leaders, and today it's great to have Peter here. Peter, you're right now building an entire new type of mobile company that optimizes the amount of data usage and the insights into that for consumers so they can save more. You already built up Boost Mobile, which was a new approach to accessibility for phone plans, and made it affordable with the dollar a day plans. And you've been in the digital mobile space with other projects as well. So I'm excited to have you here and to get into your story.
Hey, look, thanks for having me. Yeah, I've been around a little while, so obviously got the ring with it. So, but yeah, no, I love the mobile space and I love disruption and innovation, and kind of been doing it for the last 20 years.
Yeah, well, it's you've been doing well at it, and it's a good place to be in. So, where did this kind of passion for mobile for where did this kind of passion for mobile begin? Like, was it something you had as a childhood experience? Like, how did you get started in the space?
It's interesting. It goes back to the days where when I was a kid, I used to love the walkie-talkies. I used to love the communication. It always fascinated me how your voice could travel through the air and then end up in another device. I understood the cable thing because I could actually see that, but when it was wireless, it always fascinated me. So in the early days when mobile phones really started to come in, I was the first one to have one. And I always knew that eventually these things would do some incredible things. In fact, I think in 2000, 1999, I actually designed a UI, user experience with applications and everything else that had never even existed. We didn't even have the internet on the phone at that point. And so I've always loved it, always had a passion around it. And then I've always loved marketing and branding. So the technology of communication and what you can do with the device, and then branding and marketing, I thought if we could marry the two together, we'd have a great business. Because, quite often when you look at technologists, engineers who develop these technologies, they're incredibly brilliant. But when it comes to actually marketing and explaining their products and hitting them towards the consumer, they struggle. And so I had a basic knowledge of how the technology worked, and I'm not an engineer by any means, but that I also knew how to take the technology and then dumb it down for a consumer to understand, and then how we could sell that to the consumer. So I think I was unique in that position to be able to have both the understanding engineering, but also marketing.
Mhm. So, when did you decide, hey, I should create this Boost Mobile company? Like, you saw a niche in the market. What type of experience led you to seeing this niche and to wanting to create that company?
So at the time, I was actually working, running all the marketing globally for Pepsi, Pizza Hut, and Taco Bell, and so we were doing research, and we would see the research that for the younger generation, the mobile phone started to go from literally nowhere because it was so expensive, and it started climbing up the charts. So in about 99, 2000, we saw the advent really of the prepaid industry, right, which basically enabled people without credit, younger people, to go into the mobile space. So at the time, I was working with a very large carrier called Optus in Australia, and they were like, "Man, we got all these different segments that are appearing." Virgin Mobile, Richard Branson had just started coming out with Virgin Mobile, and I was like, "You know what? Let's create a brand." So Boost, the term, actually comes from boosting in the air. I was actually at a surf event, and this young kid came and he goes, "Man, I was just boosting air." And I go, "Well, what do you mean?" He goes, "Yeah, it's now." All that air riding and the surfing really started in the late 2000s. So that's where the name came from. Like, great, boosting air, love it. And so then we really drove the marketing and branding and authenticity. So we came at it from a consumer's marketing branding perspective. And back then it was very much the sea of sameness, right? So you had a silver clam, you had days and nights and weekends, you had 500 minutes, and they'd throw you a silver clam phone with insurance. So the only thing you really had to differentiate back then was branding. And so we really pioneered that both, in Australia and then obviously here in the US with the Boost brand. Taking Kanye West as an example, his first commercial he ever did was with Boost Mobile, with Ludacris in the game. And I always talk that story about authenticity because back in the day, when we were doing hip hop music, it was not good. I mean, people didn't want to be associated with it. In fact, Bill O'Reilly got on the Fox News, and he basically blasted Pepsi for doing a deal with Ludacris, calling him a thug and a hooligan, and how could Pepsi touch him? So Pepsi dropped him. At the same time, we picked him up because the generation that we were talking to wanted credibility. They wanted us to be real. Now, you fast forward to today, McDonald's was doing a Travis Scott hamburger, right? It's now really generic across the board. There was actually a book written by P. Diddy, Jay-Z, and Dr. Dre called Three Kings, and Booster's in there, and I'm in there specifically talking about how we actually were in there promoting and working with hip-hop artists long before it was cool and relevant. So that's really what we've been doing on the edgy side. And now you've got technology, so now you can do things with technology that are way different. But back then you couldn't.
Mhm. So how did you determine, how did you get the first customers for Boost and really prove that you had this product that they wanted?
Well, the first thing is we spoke to them, not at them. And at the end of the day, the carriers today, even today, you fast forward to where we are today, are notorious for thinking consumers are stupid and that they're smart, and that's how they communicate to them, right? They sell them plans that they know that you don't need, they know you don't need, and they try to convince you that they're doing a really good job for you, and then they basically, throw in tacos and a whole bunch of things on Tuesday as if you care. So they've never been able to talk, with you and experience that. So I always knew that if we could create an authentic brand like Boost that talked to the customers and then gave them the products that they wanted. Back in the day when I first started, prepaid was like you had leprosy, right? If you were a prepaid customer, you were low credit, you were poor, and they didn't want you. And so I basically dropped that and said, Boost is for you, and it's designed for you, and people loved it. So we didn't talk down to them; we talked with them, and I think that was a huge success for us. And I think one of the reasons why our brands have outlasted everybody else's.
Mhm. So bringing in Nextel into the fold, like, why did you think that they were a good partner? And at what point did you decide, hey, we need to bring this to the U.S. and we need this partner to really build the Boost in the United States?
But it's an interesting story because Nextel had actually done a deal with Virgin Mobile. People don't know that. So they had done a deal with Virgin Mobile, and I arrived about the same time. I fell in love with the walkie-talkie. I think I told you back when I was a kid, I loved it. But I love the
Yeah.
concept. These guys have come up with two ways to deliver voice, two applications. You also remember when we launched, and people don't remember this, there wasn't interoperability between text messaging. So you could only text Verizon to Verizon or AT&T to AT&T. You couldn't take a Verizon customer and text to an AT&T customer. That wasn't available. And so this instant messaging didn't exist really. And so what we wanted to do was you had this ability to be able to hit the button and talk to 20 of your friends in one go, right? It was real. It was really a great experience. So I fell in love with that technology. What happened with Virgin is they flew over to London to see Richard Branson. They brought out the i50 handset, which was a brick of a phone. It looked like a brick. It was the most horrible looking phone. Because you remember, Nextel was more industrial for the construction worker and the FBI guy. And Branson looked at it and said, I'm not putting my logo on that. That's terrible. I mean, no. So he decided to go with Sprint. So he went down the Sprint route because he had the smaller, cooler handsets. I looked at it and went, no, I love the technology. We can fix the handsets. So we basically started working with Motorola and Adderton to reduce the handsets. And that's why you see we launched with the i50, but then we also rolled out a whole new range of smaller handsets. So it was really, back then, I think we had 56 kilobits per second was the internet speed. So you basically were still sending email. Your videos were still being sent by email. We did onboard gaming. The memory was very, very low. I mean, just there were a lot of limitations. We were using Java and they were using Brew, so we didn't have any operating systems. You didn't have memory. You didn't have, so you were really constrained. I mean, young people today, like you guys, you have no idea what we were doing back then and pushing the envelope back then to what you actually have today. I think they said that the first Xbox that came out, I think the phone in 2005 had basically the same horsepower. So
Wow.
processor got faster, the experience got better, the screens got better, and obviously the networks have got faster.
Mm-hmm. So, eventually you guys rolled out this like monthly limited plan, and there was a kind of a strain on the network at the time when that was rolled out. And it was a little difficult, but you had all this surge in users. There was a lot of that. And then it looked like, at that point in time, there was a switch over to Sprint's network to handle it. In terms of like rolling that out, like why did you find it was the right time to bring out this monthly limited plan? And then, was there no other way to be able to handle it on the current network? You had to switch over to Sprint.
Yeah, I mean, look, the IDEN network, there were some promises related to technology, the voice decoder, 6-to-1 voice decoder, which was going to improve the network, which failed. Yeah, but Boost was melting the network. They were just getting too many customers on there and they couldn't keep up. So I think that the plan was to obviously merge with Sprint and then use Sprint's network because it had better capacity because Nextel was just being pushed. And the technology that they thought they had just didn't work. I mean, it was basically just a failure at the network level. And so they started moving it across to Sprint. And that really was the downward spiral of Boost because it didn't have any differentiation. At that stage we had left because the marketing kind of fell off a cliff. And really it's just kind of hummed along since then as really just a brand to fight Metro PCS and cricket. But yeah, there was no differentiation. And And in my business, if you don't have differentiation in the MVNO space, you're going to just become the sea of sameness. You're going to be like everybody else, and you fight on price. And as we all know, when you fight on price, you're eventually going to lose.
So just kind of going back to like the beginning, you have this idea for Boost in a sense. How do you go out and convince like a network to go and take you on? I mean, without much of a track record in a sense.
Well, I had no track record. The
Yeah.
interesting, someone said to me the other day, they said, you know, you're an entrepreneur, Peter. I said, yeah, it's because I couldn't work for anybody, right? And that was the real reason. And then the reason why I was successful is because I never had a plan B. So I didn't have a plan B. So I had to work. And so what I did was I went out there and I convinced the carriers that segmentation was going to be important, that you couldn't just have one brand, you needed a multi-brand strategy. And I use the car companies as an example, right? Car companies have multi-brand strategies, right? Volkswagen has multiple brands. I use the soft drink companies. Coca-Cola has multiple brands. All do one thing. They quench your thirst, it's in theory, but there's 15 variants to do that. And I said, well, I don't think mobile's any different. What's going to work for a 55 to 65-year-old is not going to work for an 18-year-old. And so it had to be brand, not just product. And so we were one of the first to pioneer the multi-brand strategy. So I think at the time, the carriers didn't really care. I mean, if you think about where we were in the US when we came in, it was only 49% market penetration. I mean, 51% of the people didn't even have a phone, right? Today, it's oversaturated. Now you're just stealing from each other. Back then, there's an incredible opportunity. And we also did prepaid, which, as I said, was like the leprosy. Nobody wanted them because it was the poor credit challenged customer, and Wall Street didn't value them. So, Wall Street would give you $2,000 a sub for a postpaid customer and like $150 for a prepaid customer. And where we are today now, it's 50-50, and it's all kind of like they tell you the lines have kind of blurred.
So you go out there with this offering for prepaid, and you're trying to convince a network to go and take you on without any track record. So you're basically in like a category they neglect. You have no experience, et cetera. Why didn't you think that if they saw enough of potential in what you're talking about, they would just do it on their own without you, in a sense?
Because they weren't capable of doing it on their own. I mean, most of the telcos, even today, most of the telcos, they're not marketing people. They're engineers, right? They've come up by putting hard hats on and climbing telephone poles for a living. And so they don't have the background. They're operators, they're CFOs. And so marketing's foreign to them. And I think what we brought in was this fresh approach of opening new points of distribution. First time ever branding. I remember we had a massive event in Las Vegas, the Boost Mobile Pro, the biggest skateboarding event. And we brought in Lincoln Park, and I brought in Nelly. I think this was in 2002, maybe 2003. And I had the Nextel guys with me, CEO of Nextel. And I said, let me show you the power of a brand. So we had Lincoln Park throw out Boost hats into the audience at the Hard Rock Cafe. And then we threw out Nextel hats. Well, when they were cleaning up, the cleaners were in there. There wasn't one Boost hat left. Every Nextel hat was still on the ground. And I told them, that is the power of a brand. And from then, they got it because that was a test market, in Las Vegas and Nevada and California. And then it rolled out nationwide. And MobileX is no different. And I think one of the reasons why T-Mobile has been successful is because they've invested heavily in their brand. I mean, John Legere did that. He basically took the brand and gave it a personality, and people felt part of it. I still own Boost in Australia. If you're ever down in Australia, the Boost brand is number one indexing youth brand in the country. And more importantly, people come on and defend us. Like if someone attacks the Boost product, all of our customers come on and defend us. So we've got like an army that basically loves our brand and loves what we're doing. And I think that that's critical and doesn't exist, by the way, today in the big brands.
Mm-hmm. So when did you decide you wanted to create a new mobile brand, MobileX, and what inspired you to do that? What did you see in the market? What niche?
Well, the interesting thing is I wasn't looking to start another MVNO. And as you know, I fought very hard with the FCC and the DOJ when the Sprint T-Mobile merger was coming. I was the first in to see the Department of Justice Antitrust Division, and I was the last out of there. Same with the FCC chairman and all the commissioners. I saw that the market was consolidating, right? And that we were going to have less and less customers and, less and less choices for customers. And so I saw what was happening with TracFone being bought by Verizon, the $7 billion, with the largest MVNO. Mint Mobile's now buying, T-Mobile. Well, T-Mobile's now buying Mint Mobile. And so I was concerned. And then Boost obviously went to Dish, and I knew that they would, fail at that. And so I was like, man, we need another brand to go in there and fight. So it was really out of dealers and consumers going, Peter, we're going to need another brand. But I wanted to do it different, right? So whatever I did was going to be different. If it wasn't different, we weren't going to do it. And that's where we exist today. And the story of how we got our relationship going with our carrier partner, Verizon, is unique in itself because we have a very unique relationship, something I've never done before and they've never done before. But it was all about driving AI. Back in 2019, I was using AI when it wasn't a buzzword. Now everybody's using it. And so it was really out of a necessity to fill a void that I thought was going to be in the market.
So can you just talk about the Verizon relationship and how that came about, and as to why it's so unique, why it's so different this time?
Well, what we have is a very unique platform. And in order to do that, you need a very unique relationship with the carrier. So we basically needed to build our own private 5G network. We needed real-time APIs. There's two ways that carriers make money today, right? And consumers are the last ones that are a concern to them. The first one is in overage, right? So they basically will sit there and they'll sell you a 2 gig plan, a 3 gig plan. As an example, the cable guys sell you a 1 gig plan for I think $15. If you go over, it's another 15, right? So they cap you at those points, or they slow you down, or they stop you altogether. And then there's the breakage, right? And these are the unlimited plans, what I call the fake unlimited plans. And that's basically knowing the average usage is around 11 or 12 gigabytes. They sell you 30, right? And so you feel great, right? I feel fantastic. And I think I read somewhere it was 50 or 60% of the carrier's margin is made out of data selling to customers that you don't need. So customers are really the last ones to be thought about. And so what I wanted to do was something different is, I'll ask you this question, and I'm almost going to put $1 million on it. You won't be able to answer it. How much data do you use a month?
Yeah, I don't know, and I don't think the average person knows.
They don't, right? And then the next question is, what's the exact amount of money you pay every month? Exact to the cent, including taxes and fees.
We have a business plan, and there's multiple lines on it, but it's probably $70 or something a person.
The reality is nobody knows, right? So
Yeah.
you think about this for a second. I'd say to people, so you don't know what you're buying, you don't know what you're getting, and you don't even know exactly what you're paying, and yet you're satisfied. And that's because consumers have been brainwashed into thinking, well, I need these unlimited plans and the carriers are looking after me and I don't want to go over. And I'm like, but you'll never go over. They know you'll never go over. And so my thought was, if I could answer that question, how much do I need? Well, there's only one thing that can do that, machine learning AI. It basically, instead of telling you what you use in the prior month, it's going to help you predict what you're going to use in the future month. So that's what we went away and did. Now, in order to do that, we need real-time APIs coming out of a network. I need to know exactly what you're doing every single second of the day when it comes to network usage in order for us to get it right. And so that was what we launched. So with MobileX, you download the app. It's all app-driven. You can log on via Apple, or you can log on via Google Pay, or you can just put in your email and put your own credit card in. But we've made it simple to be able to log on, just like any other app, Spotify, Uber. You don't have to go create a whole new account. Bring your number over is very, very easy. You basically can do three choices. You can take one of the fake unlimited plans that we offer, which is basically best in market. So the 30 gig, 2488, or the 5 gig at 1488. Or you can take the live while you learn, right? Which is basically just for the first 10 days, just let let our platform tell you what you need. And at the end of the 10 days, we come back and we say, Ben, you need 2.2 gigabytes. You need 150 minutes text, and your bill's like $8.12. And you're like, fantastic. And then it's constantly doing it. Now, if you choose one of the unlimited plans because you just want to be safe, we still do the same thing. And at the end of it, when we go to renew you for the next month, and we say, hey, look, you don't need to spend $24.88. You can. I'm quite happy for you to donate the money to us. I'll just use it for a better Christmas party. Or you can basically choose this cheaper plan. So I think we're the only carrier in the world that actually is trying to lower your plan every month. We try to save you money. And it's funny because I really thought one of the biggest issues I would have is this ability to be able to have people get past the concept of unlimited. 98% of the people that are coming in looking for unlimited are choosing I just want to know. 98% of our customers just want that 10 days just to know. And by the way, if you should be on one of those fake unlimited plans, right, you're using north of 15 or 20 gigabytes, at least you know that's where I should be. But nobody needs to be on a 50 or 60 gig plan. I mean, unless you're running a call center off your phone.
So, I mean, I think the biggest problem in the industry, it's kind of like the Tesla range anxiety issue, where you want this bigger battery because you don't want to have to deal with like not being able to charge, and you want this unlimited plan because you don't have to think about that. How are you targeting the marketing towards these people that maybe are going with the unlimited plans with other carriers, and they just because of that fear? Like, how do you shape marketing around solving that problem?
Well, we sell the bigger battery, so you can buy the bigger battery, but the difference is we let you know at the end of the month that you didn't need the bigger battery. And so we have that comfort zone for you to be able to say, okay, I've got the best unlimited plan in the market, 30 gigs. If you're using 30 gigs a month, anything over 30 gigs, you should not be with us or any other MVNO. You should be moving to a postpaid plan and paying 70 or 80 bucks a month. We're not for everyone. And we make that very, very clear. We also have flexibility. Man, this is the one thing that when you buy a plan, especially the Mint Mobile plans, right? They're 3, 6, and 12 months. You're locking in for 12 months. If you use, as an example, over summer, you might decide to go on the road. So you want to take one of our unlimited plans, right? You're going to use a lot more gigs. You're going to be hotspotting out of your camper van or out of, if you're camping. So you'll need the unlimited plan. But then you go back to school or back to college, you're on Wi-Fi. You're like, I don't need to be spending 24 bucks anymore. We give that flexibility. As an example, my daughter, she's 10. She came to me, she said, Dad, I want a phone. I said, fine. She went on the app and she said, how much have I got? I said, you get $10, hon. That's it. I'm only going to give you $10. She went and built her own plan. So she went in and she put in $10 in the app. It came up. You can get 1.67 gigabytes. And then she said, Dad, I don't need unlimited talk and text, right? That's full 50. I only call you. Everybody else I talk to is OTT, right? Whether it's through my social apps or whether it's through WhatsApp. So can I buy the cheaper plan? So she went on and took 50 minutes and 50 texts for $1.50. That boosted her up now to $3. To 3 gigabytes because data was more important to her. So she constructed her own plan based on her needs. Well, no one allows that. No one gives you that option to set a budget and then be flexible in where you want it. Less minutes and talk and text, more data. Speed controls. We allow you to change the speed video. So 480, 720. 480 uses 80 to 90% less data, right? And unless you're streaming a sporting event where you got balls flying back and forth, you don't really need 4K. But it burns 90% more data. So just this level of flexibility, customization, set it and then forget it. And people are saving unbelievable amounts of money. People who are older, who are on these $60, $70, $80 T-Mobile plans, who don't even have social media, don't even use video. They're coming from $80 down to $9. And they're working out over the last 10 years, they probably spent $10,000 with carriers on stuff they didn't need. So we're seeing a change in consumers, and you've just got to get them educated. And I think the adult question, if you need an unlimited plan, if you're worried about that, come on our unlimited plan. And by the way, every month we'll let you know that you don't need to be on it until you realize that you can change.
So how do you plan on changing the international landscape? I mean, when you go to a different country now, most of these plans are like $10 a day to even use them. You cap out your data; it's like 500 megabytes. You go through it really quickly. It's very much less than ideal. So what have you thought about in terms of implementing to change that and to make it a much better plan for international?
Okay, so international roaming is the third biggest scam that carriers have ever put onto consumers, right? Because you mentioned about the $10 a day and you get all that. What you didn't mention is you're still paying for your plan here, right?
Right.
So you're not in the country, but you're still paying for that gigabyte. So if you have a 30 or 40 or 50 gig plan and you go to Europe for four weeks, you still paid for 50 gigs in America. And out of the kindness of their heart, they allowed you to bolt on a $10 a day plan for like 500 megs, right? And you feel good about that. Like, oh, this is fantastic. Well, we're going to change that. My attitude is if I've got 30 gigs in America, that 30 gigs should come with me. I want a global gigabyte. And so what we're building is a platform where we have to integrate in all the carriers. So if you have 5 gigs here in America, you can take it to the UK and you can use it in the UK. If you have 5 gigs in the UK and you come to America, here it's same in Singapore, same everywhere else. Eliminate international roaming. One world, one number. When you go to Europe and you land, you don't put in a local EU account or a UK account for Snapchat, Instagram, Uber. It all works. Netflix, it all works, right? All those platforms work. The clunky part is getting onto a network. And the carriers have been doing this for so long. And it frustrates me because consumers just don't seem to understand how they're being taken. And what we're trying to do is educate them. And you imagine taking your gigabytes anywhere in the world. You don't need to worry about turning on international roaming. You arrive in the UK and your phone works and your gigabytes. And so I'm testing it now. So I've been traveling around the world, been in UK, Europe, and Asia recently. It's phenomenal. Like I arrive in Australia, and if I need a gig, I just buy a gig. It buys a gig, tops up, I'm off and running. And so that we think is going to be a game changer over the next 6 to 12 months as we roll that out.
Just the last question that I have, Peter. Why do you think 5G and the way it's been enacted has been a scam? And what do you think are the biggest positives that 5G should have had?
The first thing that 5G should have had is that it was a better speed experience for people, for some people, a very small percentage. They should have actually charged them for speed, right? Speed-based performance. So if you want faster speeds, lower latency, if you want the real 5G network, then you pay a premium. No different to going on the toll. The majority of people actually do not need 5G. 5G has been a flop, let's be honest, right? They said cars and drones and remote this and remote that, and they said remote surgery. That didn't pan out because no one's going to trust the network while someone's operating on you. Then they went to enterprise. It's all about enterprise, and enterprise hasn't really palmed out. These guys are trying to justify the hundreds of billions of dollars they spent on spectrum and also on 5G technology. Nokia and Ericsson as well. That's why you always got to take the Ericsson average usage with a grain of salt, because they basically provide a lot of the infrastructure to these networks. It was overhyped. If you look at 3G, so 3G to 4G changed our lives, right? For those who remember 3G, there was buffering and it was a nightmare and you didn't have applications because they wouldn't run. 4G changed that, right? 4G gave us video without buffering. I don't know about you, but I never complained on the 4G world that my video didn't launch fast. It was a good experience. Right. And so the carriers were basically struggling to come up with a new idea. They put all their eggs into the 5G basket, and it's been an absolute flop. They don't charge any more for it. In fact, they're charging less for it. And it's also now killed 6G in my mind. I don't think we're going to have a 6G for a long, long time, because any CFO goes into his board and says, I need another $10 billion or $100 billion to roll out 6G, the shareholders on the board will kick them out. So I think it's stalled our growth. They should have done it in smaller areas, more of a hotspot strategy, right, where people needed it. Also looking at rural, where you could replace the fixed wireless access, and be very more tactical about where they rolled out 5G, but they didn't. And now consumers are paying the price because they're getting charged more for less.
Yeah. Well, Peter, I appreciate you coming on. With MobileX, I think you were solving some major industry problems. This international issue is huge. It's a major issue that hasn't been addressed really by anybody. And, enabling this accessibility to understanding your plans and being smart about that with data usage, it's something that's needed in the industry. So I'm excited to see your continued success with MobileX.
Matt, I really appreciate you taking the time. Thanks, man.